All right, less than 3 weeks to football. We're running through the SEC, knocking out positional group analysis. We bring in Chad Niepling from, of course, Gridiron Now, but also join the two of us along with Mike Laval and David Waters on SEC Breakdown on Twitter, on Facebook. Plenty of content as we get you set for week one. Chad, it's always a good time. Let's talk some Arkansas football up front where Brett Bielema has his pride and joy. It's the offensive line, but without three starters from last year. And when you talk Arkansas offensive line, everybody knows about Dan Skipper. He's even going to move positions. Frank Ragnow is a guy very experienced after 13 starts last season. How do you think this thing will shape out? Because you've seen these guys line up just about everywhere across the front.
Yeah, ever since spring, I think the biggest storyline coming into the fall was how do you replace Ashton, Trey Tull, or Cook, those guys that were seasoned last year, and now you have your only two guys that you have that, as far as experience are concerned, are Dan Skipper and Frank Ragnow. Ragnow has played, since being a freshman. He came in his freshman year, got some work at center. Last year as a sophomore, he worked at the right guard position next to Dan Skipper at right tackle, and then turned around and now he's back at center this year. And Skipper, as of the scrimmage this past Saturday and practices this last week, has now moved back to the left tackle position, which was his natural position coming out of high school and also when he came to Arkansas, which honestly makes sense, Mark, because you look at Skipper, he's got the more athletic ankles and calves that you see on a left tackle. He's a little more nimble. Looks more like your basketball player type of lineman that you want at that left tackle position. And so that move doesn't shock me, but what I did find interesting was that Bielema commented Saturday after the scrimmage that we would see Skipper back at the right tackle position. He could flip-flop either way. And I don't know necessarily if that's because, maybe an injury occurs on the right side. They've got somebody that they can go with. But if you're looking at experience, those are your two guys. Had some backups with Zach Rogers, who backed up the center position in the spring. You got Brian Wallace. If he hadn't been injured, would probably have been one of the guys that was on the starting five in the spring, but he ended up getting injured in the spring, and that pretty much kind of shortened his ability. You got Colton Jackson, who's an Arkansas native, who can play that left tackle position. So you've got some depth there if you keep Skipper at the left side. And then again, you got Jake Rollerson, the offensive lineman that is a graduate transfer from Texas. He's still got 2 years, I believe, of eligibility left. He redshirted 1 year, so he spent 3 at Texas. He's got experience at the center, the guard, and the tackle position while being there. And so faced off against Arkansas at the right tackle position in the Advocare Bowl a couple seasons ago. And he held his own against the 2014 defense that ended up finishing number 2 in the SEC in total defense. So he's a guy that can hold his own. And that being said, I feel like there's depth here. I know it's a big question for a lot of people, but even still, I think there's a lot of talent. The four-star defensive lineman out of IMG, Florida's football academy. There's just a factory, as it were. Came in, ended up getting swapped over to the offensive line, which coincidentally Kurt Anderson did himself during his career, during his college and NFL career, got swapped over from defense to the offensive side. So he's been able to really help Yelta in that transition. You throw in four-star true freshman Jake Eimert, who'll probably back Yelta up at that guard position, that left guard position. So I think you've got a lot of talent, and I think people are just going to have to get used to some new names with this offensive line that's coming up for Bielema. But these are Bielema's guys. They're all 300-plus pound, and they've got one objective, and that's to punch you in the nose for 4 quarters. And we'll just have to, the experience for some of these guys is just going to have to be a baptism by fire when they kick off against Louisiana Tech in a couple of weeks.
Heinrich, 20th rated guard out of Iowa. Obviously, that's territory that Bielema knows very well. You talk about Rollerson as a 4-star in that 2013 recruiting class, got 5 starts, as you mentioned, as a redshirt freshman. What's interesting about Bielema's strategy, and you've spoke to this in the past, Chad, you've written about it as well, is that usually when you play a lot of JUCO players, when you play a lot of true freshmen, it speaks to lack of talent, lack of depth in a program. But that's Bielema's way. That's certainly not the case here.
Yeah, exactly. He's not afraid to start a freshman if the guy's talented. We've seen it not only at the line position, but running backs in particular. is something he's gone with. He prefers to have a little more experience at the quarterback position, and also out wide with his tight ends and wide receivers. But and as far as the running back position is concerned, freshman during the course of this time period. And so I think that that's going to be something that continues to be a trend. And Jake Einrich, if he's skilled enough, he could find himself. But that being said, there's enough talent on this offensive line that he doesn't have to have a freshman get that play this year.
All right. So the Razorbacks, just to give some perspective to it, 99 games out of the starters coming back in 2015. So rewind a year, you got 99 games of experience from that offensive line. You had 86 of those starting games. Now compare that to 2016 as we get ready for week 1, and you got 73 games, or just about half as many starts, 86 versus 47. So the experience not quite there from what we've seen out of Arkansas's offensive line in the past, but the recruiting has been so much better in the last couple of years. It sounds like you're pretty comfortable.
I think you really have to worry. The scrimmage on Saturday was really telltale. That being said, Bielema did have to dial the defense back a little bit. He told Rob Smith to dial it back a little, and kind of keep the coverage a little basic. But and then it came out tough. We saw Rollerson at the right tackle position. Next to him was Zach Rogers at the right guard position. Frank now played center. Frank Ragnow was at the center position. And then you had Froholt at left guard, and you had Skipper at left tackle. And immediately they came out, they slung the ball on the first play, and then they turned around and ran the ball. And Raleigh Williams did a phenomenal job. The holes busted open for him. And this defense is touted to be one of the better defenses in the conference coming back this next year. So this offensive line, honestly, I think once they figure out the 5 that they want to start, I think it's just a matter of then of just the unit gelling together, as it were. But you've got quality depth, like I said, to back up these guys. And again, another guy to watch out for was Jalen Merrick, 4-star coming out of high school that got picked up. And Bielema said since the spring has ended and he's come back in for this fall, he's turned into a completely different man. And he said he could definitely see him being worked into the rotation.
Okay, as you can tell, Chad's all over Arkansas practice. He's out there just about every day. He knows this roster, knows the personnel like nobody else. Join us on SEC Breakdown on Facebook, on Twitter. Chad, myself, Mike Laval, and David Waters get you set for week 1 in the SEC and throughout the season. All right, Chad, thanks for the breakdown, man.